A millionaire paid a homeless woman to carry his child, but when the baby was born, he fell to his knees crying. "Hello, it's Uncle Joel. Come along with me to the very end, and I promise you will be delighted, thrilled, and inspired by this amazing story. Enjoy." Marcus Stanton had everything most people dream about: a breathtaking apartment in the heart of the Upper East Side in New York City, designer furniture, artwork scattered through every room, and an incredible view of a city that seemed to never sleep. In the business world, he was known as a true genius. He closed multi-million-dollar deals, ran a rock-solid company, had a team that respected him, and his bank account only grew. Everything looked perfect, at least from the outside, but inside, the story was different. Marcus's day started early. He had a rigid routine, almost like a ritual. He woke at 5 a.m., ran on his state-of-the-art treadmill, ate a balanced breakfast prepared by his housekeeper, and before 7 he was dressed in an impeccable suit. Then he rode the elevator down to the garage where his Jaguar XF waited, gleaming. Despite the flawless machinery of his life, he felt no real joy. These were just steps he followed on autopilot. When he arrived at work, his posture changed. There he was the boss, the one everyone admired and feared. With quick, precise decisions, he led meetings, solved problems, and at the end of the day was always praised for his cool efficiency. But when the workday ended and he returned to his penthouse, the silence was deafening. The loneliness swallowed him whole, even if he rarely admitted that to himself. Sitting in his leather armchair, looking at the glittering city through a wall of glass, he thought, "I have everything a person could want." And somehow it's still not enough. It felt like something was always out of place. He had tried to fill the emptiness before: 2 marriages, luxurious parties, trips to exotic destinations, but nothing worked. The marriages were disasters, always ending at the same point: accusations, hurt, and cold separations. The parties were just noise and temporary distraction, and the trips were only a way to tighten a shiny bandage over a wound that never healed. But he always came back to the same emptiness. He no longer knew if the problem was with other people or with himself. Maybe it was something deeper, a feeling that no amount of money could fix over time. He simply gave up on finding love. For Marcus, relationships had become the definition of a headache. He didn't want broken promises, fights, or regrets. Love is a fantasy that only slows life down, he told himself. What really mattered to him was legacy, something that would remain after he was gone. Marcus wanted to leave a mark on the world, something that carried his name and story. That's how he began to think about having a child. The idea seemed perfect: an heir to continue his lineage, someone to carry the weight of the Stanton name and give meaning to everything he'd built. He thought about it with the same coldness he applied to business. No marriage, no emotional complications, just a child. Someone to whom he could transfer everything he had and make sure the family name didn't end with him. Deep down, Marcus wasn't exactly a bad man. He was practical, direct, and had built his life believing feelings were weaknesses that only got in the way. When he looked at his life, he saw success and respect, but also a gaping hole he didn't know how to fill. Each achievement felt smaller than the last, and the glow of each victory faded quickly, leaving behind an even bigger emptiness. On the rare nights he managed to sleep, he dreamed of a future where he wasn't alone. Most of the time, though, he woke before the dream made sense. Then there he was again at 5 in the morning, restarting the cycle. Staring at the city below, he wondered if what was missing was really something money could buy. In his mind, the world was divided between those who left their mark and those who simply passed through it. It didn't matter if you were rich, famous, or just another ordinary person. In the end, it all came down to what you left behind, and to him it was unacceptable that everything he'd built would end with his life. He needed something more, something that would guarantee the Stanton name would continue for generations. Those were the kinds of thoughts he had on the loneliest nights, sitting on the leather sofa of his penthouse, looking at New York alive out there while he felt trapped in a bubble of silence. He remembered his childhood, how his father talked about the pride of being a Stanton. It wasn't just a last name, it was almost a brand. "We're different, we always win," his father used to say. But his father didn't live to see what Marcus would become. He died young, of a heart attack, when Marcus was just starting college. It was a shock, but it also became fuel. Marcus decided he'd make the family name shine like never before. And he did, with cold blood, hard work, and zero room for distraction. In the rush of all that, he never thought he'd be sitting there one day, asking who would carry it all forward. The problem was that Marcus didn't have children, and to be honest, until recently, he'd never thought that would be a problem. He was too busy climbing. The marriages he attempted were chaotic episodes he wanted to forget. In the end, what remained was the conviction that love and commitment were emotional traps, not worth the effort. But without a child, everything he'd built would stop with him, and that bothered him more than anything. It wasn't about money or inheritance, it was about continuity, about someone to carry his story. Marcus started to think about it practically, like any other problem. Having a child didn't have to be complicated. He had money, contacts, resources. He didn't need a marriage or a partner to share parenting. He just needed an heir, someone he could teach, prepare, mold, someone he could equip to carry the Stanton name with the same pride his father had passed to him. The idea kept growing inside him. Late at night, he searched on his phone for ways to have children without a relationship. Some articles talked about artificial insemination, others about surrogacy. At first it felt strange, but he quickly realized it made sense. It was exactly what he needed, a way to start a family without the emotional complications he'd always avoided. He imagined himself teaching his child chess, showing how the markets worked, preparing them to take over the company one day. It all seemed right, practical, perfect. In his head, he already had a plan, a clear contract, no room for misunderstandings or drama. Everything would be calculated. He would choose a woman who agreed to participate in a straightforward way. Someone who understood it was an agreement, not a relationship. It sounded good on paper, but he knew he'd need to find the right person, and that's where he stalled. How to start? How to guarantee everything would go exactly as he wanted? For a few days, Marcus set the idea aside and focused on work, but it kept coming back, like a stubborn fly he couldn't ignore. Every time he looked at the future, he saw a giant question mark. He was getting older, not old by health or appearance standards, but time waits for no one. The longer he put it off, the more he risked losing the chance to build this legacy. One night, while sipping whiskey on his balcony, the decision finally arrived. He couldn't wait anymore. That's it. I'll do it my way. No complications, no illusions. Just me and my future child. In that moment, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. It seemed he finally had direction. The emptiness that used to swallow everything cracked a little. It wasn't happiness exactly, but a sense of purpose. For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt he was in control of something that truly mattered. It was an ordinary afternoon in New York. The sky was grey, and traffic was in its usual mode, chaos. Marcus Stanton drove through crowded streets from one meeting to the next, as he did almost every day. Some bland instrumental played on the radio, something he barely noticed. For him, the car was an extension of the office where he mentally reviewed appointments and strategies, always focused on what came next. But that afternoon, something different happened. Stopped at a light near Central Park, something caught his attention. A figure approached his window, a young woman, probably in her early 20s, but she looked worn, like she carried the weight of the world on her back. Her hair was messy, her clothes simple and worn, and there was a strange brightness in her eyes. Not joy, but a mix of exhaustion and determination. "Got anything for me?" she asked. Her voice was low but firm. She didn't seem to beg, but she wasn't defiant either. More like practical, direct, almost routine. Without taking his eyes off her, Marcus stayed silent for a few seconds. He wasn't used to this kind of approach. Usually he avoided eye contact in these situations, but this time something held him there. Maybe it was her expression, or the way her eyes met his directly, without shame. He wasn't the kind of man to be thrown off by a simple exchange of glances with a stranger. With an impatient gesture, he answered coldly, "Move along." When the light turned green, he accelerated and left her behind. For a few minutes, he went on as if nothing had happened. But as time passed, an odd feeling began to bother him. He couldn't explain why, but the image of that woman wouldn't leave his head. The eyes, the way she spoke, the dignity she carried even in that situation. It felt like something inside him had been poked. He tried to ignore it. He thought of his next appointment, mentally reviewed his talking points. It didn't work. The more he tried to push the thought away, the stronger the memory of the scene became. Finally, after a few blocks, he did something he never did. He made a completely impulsive decision, turned the wheel and doubled back. By the time he reached the intersection again, his heart was racing, though he wouldn't admit that even to himself. There she was, in the same spot, leaning against a lamppost, as if time had stopped for her. This time he pulled over, lowered the window, and spoke with the same firmness as before, but a different tone. "Get in. No questions." The woman looked at him, suspicious. It's not every day a man in an expensive suit, driving a Jaguar, stops to talk to someone like her. "Why?" she asked, stepping back. She clearly didn't trust him, and Marcus knew he'd have to convince her quickly, or she'd just walk away. "I'm not here to hurt you or waste your time, I want to help. But in my way. Take it or leave it," he said, without sugarcoating. Her hesitation lasted a few seconds, but in the end she got in. Maybe it was Marcus's confident tone, or maybe it was simply that she had nothing to lose. As soon as she sat, she kept her hands close to her sides, as if ready to bolt at any moment. "What's your name?" Marcus asked as he pulled away. "Claire," she said, not looking directly at him. The name echoed in his head, simple but stronger than he expected. Marcus didn't know who she was or what she'd been through, but for some reason he felt this was more than a coincidence. As he drove, he caught himself thinking how this woman, whom he'd met by chance, might be about to change the course of his life. Marcus drove in silence with Claire beside him, staring out the Jaguar's window as if she couldn't believe this was really happening. It didn't make logical sense to him. He was never the type to act on impulse, especially with someone he didn't know. But for some reason, he was in the middle of a situation he hadn't planned, and it made him uncomfortable. Claire didn't know what to think either. Her life had been full of uncertainty, and she'd learned not to trust strangers, especially men who appeared out of nowhere with promises of help. At the same time, there was something about Marcus's posture that made her want to believe this could be different. He didn't seem to have ulterior motives. There was nothing in his eyes suggesting anything beyond what he'd said, a direct, practical proposal. She felt that despite everything, he was honest about what he wanted. "You're awfully quiet," Marcus said suddenly, breaking the silence. "You're suspicious, huh?" Claire turned her face toward him, unsure how to answer. "Shouldn't I be?" she shot back, folding her arms. Marcus sighed, but didn't seem annoyed. "You're right. I would be too. I'll be straight. I have a proposal for you, something that could change your life." Claire raised an eyebrow. It was always like this. Proposals, promises, sweet words. She'd heard it all on the streets, and the ending was almost always the same. Disappointment. "What kind of proposal?" she asked, trying not to sound as skeptical as she felt. "First, let's go somewhere calm. We can't talk in the middle of traffic." He pressed the accelerator a little more, eager to leave that awkward moment behind as quickly as possible. A short while later, they reached a quiet coffee shop away from the main avenues, the kind of place where no one would bother them. Marcus knew Claire would feel safer there than anywhere else. As soon as they walked in, he ordered a black coffee for himself and a juice for her without even asking what she wanted. Claire didn't protest. She was more curious to see where this was going. Seated at a corner table, he finally began to explain. "I'll be direct. I'm not good at beating around the bush," he said, speaking firmly, like he was pitching a business project. It was strange, disconcerting even, but she couldn't look away. It's not every day someone calls you to a meeting like this and suddenly drops something so out of the ordinary. "I want everything clear from the start," Marcus began, leaning back in his chair. He had that executive air of someone used to being in control, but there was something in his eyes that hinted at a certain vulnerability, even if he tried to hide it. "I'm not here to offer charity or play the good guy. I have an objective. I want to have a child. That's it." Claire crossed her arms, still guarded. "And what do you think I am? Some walking catalogue of options?" The tone was sharper than she intended, but who could blame her? The whole idea felt surreal. "That's not it," he replied without losing his calm. "I saw an opportunity. You need a way out, right? I need something too. It's a simple agreement." Simple? She shook her head, still trying to process what she was hearing. You're asking me to carry your child. How is that simple? Marcus took a breath, elbows on the table, leaning forward. I'm not asking you for anything right now. Just listen. That's all. If at the end you think it doesn't make sense, we part ways. But I think you'll see there's nothing complicated here. Claire bit her lower lip, still suspicious, then gestured for him to continue. If nothing else, she was there. I want a child, but I don't want feelings involved. Marriage, dating, drama. I've been there, and it didn't work. I want something straightforward. An heir to carry on my name and what I've built. And I can offer you something no one else will. Like what? Claire narrowed her eyes. Stability, a future, money to restart your life from scratch, off the streets. You decide what to do with it. I won't control you or ask for anything beyond what we agree. You carry the baby, we follow a contract, and afterwards you have your freedom. That's it. The word contract made Claire give a nervous laugh. So to you it's business, a transaction. In a way, yes, he answered without hesitation. But don't get me wrong, I know it's more than that. I just don't want to complicate things with feelings or promises no one can keep. I've seen how that ends, and I'm not repeating it. Claire went quiet. It's not like she had many options. The streets were unforgiving, and she knew sooner or later things could get worse. Even so, the idea of carrying a baby for 9 months for a stranger was something she'd never imagined. And how do I know you're not trying to scam me? That this isn't some kind of setup? You don't, he said, meeting her eyes. That's why I'm proposing a contract. Everything documented, with lawyers and clear clauses. Your rights guaranteed. Nothing happens without your consent. She studied him, trying to see if he was being sincere or just very good at lying. There was no arrogance in his tone, which was strange given how confident he seemed. It was as if he truly believed he was doing something fair. And if I say I don't want to, she asked, more to see his reaction than because she had an answer already. You can say no, he replied, leaning back. I won't force anything, but honestly, think hard. The way I see it, this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to get out of this. Claire tightened her grip on the glass, fingers pressing the cold surface. He was right, it was an opportunity. But it was also huge, and she knew that if she accepted, her life would never be the same. The problem was, for someone like her, someone who'd learned not to trust, the idea of making a deal with a rich stranger felt absurd. How much? She finally asked, barely realizing she'd said it aloud. Marcus gave a small smile, not victory, but relief. Enough that you won't have to worry about money again, and not just that. During the whole process, you'll have everything you need. Housing, medical care, anything. She laughed softly, shaking her head in disbelief. You make it sound so easy. It's not easy, he said, more serious now. But it's simple. And that's what I'm offering, simplicity. A clear path. Claire left the cafe with her head buzzing. Marcus's words echoed like a scratched record. A chance to start over, that's what he'd called it. Simple, direct, as if the decision were obvious. But for her, none of it was simple. Since when had anything in her life ever been simple? She wandered the streets of New York with no real destination. The chilly afternoon breeze cut her skin, but she barely noticed. What weighed on her was the decision. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, grab the opportunity, and leave behind a life that had taken so much from her. But another part screamed for caution. Why would a man like Marcus Stanton, clearly rich and powerful, choose a woman like her for something so important? She glanced at her reflection in a storefront window. Messy hair, worn clothes. He hadn't chosen her by chance, had he? He didn't know her story, yet he wanted to trust her to carry his child. It was absurd. Claire had never had an easy life. She grew up in a house too small for the number of people living there, left early thinking freedom would fix things, and found a world even harsher. She tried everything to get by, odd jobs, side gigs, until the options dried up. The streets were cruel, and over time she learned to harden her heart. She learned to distrust, because trusting usually meant being fooled or worse, hurt. Now, in the middle of this wild proposal, all that history screamed inside her. She wanted to believe Marcus was sincere, but it felt too good to be true, and when something felt too good, there was usually a price she couldn't afford. She sat on a bench, arms crossed, trying to protect herself from the cold, though it wasn't just the weather making her uncomfortable. It was doubt. What if he was lying? What if she was just a piece in some scheme she couldn't see? What would happen after the baby was born? He said a contract would protect her, but contracts didn't protect people like her. Marcus Stanton was the kind of man who would always have the advantage, no matter what the papers said. On the other hand, she knew what would happen if she said no. Tomorrow would be the same as today, the same as yesterday, the same struggle to find a place to sleep, the same search for food, the same feeling that the world had nothing left to offer. She was tired of living a life with no way out, but accepting the proposal was also terrifying. It wasn't just fear that Marcus might be lying. It was fear of failing. What if she couldn't do it? What if something went wrong with the pregnancy? Or worse, what if she grew attached to the baby? She had no experience with motherhood, but she imagined that carrying life inside you for 9 months wasn't something you just did and then forgot. How would she handle it? Questions flooded in, one after another, until Claire felt like her head would explode. She needed air. She stood and walked again without aim. Deep down, she wanted to believe she could trust Marcus. He seemed different, at least a little. He didn't treat her like trash the way many others did. He hadn't lied or tried to string her along. So far, that was more than she could say for most people. Maybe he was being sincere. Maybe this really was the chance she'd been waiting for. But then the other side of her, the suspicious side she'd learned to listen to, whispered, "No one does anything for you without wanting something in return." No one. She knew the decision had to be well thought out. It wasn't just about money or getting off the streets. It was about her life, her future, and something she'd never imagined before, being a mother. She stopped and looked up at the darkening sky, knowing the night would be long. Claire knew she couldn't put the decision off forever. After days of wondering and replaying every detail of the conversation with Marcus, she realized she was running out of time. Or maybe out of excuses. Deep down, a small voice already knew the answer. Go. It's not easy, but it's a chance. Even with all the doubts, it was something she couldn't ignore. Not when the alternative was returning to the same life that had drained her for so many years. Late in the day, Claire finally picked up the phone Marcus had left her at the cafe. He'd said she could call when she was ready. If she wanted to say no, there'd be no pressure. But if she accepted, things would move quickly. Call or don't call. She stared at the old phone for what felt like forever, then, with a deep breath, dialed the number. The answer came almost immediately. "Marcus Stanton," he said, voice firm and controlled as always. Claire hesitated a moment before speaking. "It's Claire. I've decided. I want to accept your proposal." On the other end, there was a brief silence, as if he were processing the words. "All right," he replied without surprise. "Let's meet to discuss the next steps tomorrow morning at my office. I'll text you the address." "Does that work?" She managed a quiet, "Okay." When she hung up, she felt a mix of relief and anxiety. She'd taken the first step, but she knew there was a long road ahead. The next morning, Claire arrived at the address Marcus had sent. It was an imposing building with glass gleaming in the sun and a lobby so polished she felt out of place just stepping inside. She took a breath and moved forward. A receptionist who looked like she belonged in a fashion catalogue guided her to Marcus's floor. Entering his office, Claire couldn't help noticing how everything was perfectly organized. The spotless desk, the sophisticated furniture, the modern paintings on the walls. It was the opposite of the chaos her life had been. And at the center of it all was him, Marcus Stanton, in an immaculate suit and with a serious look. "Claire, I'm glad you came," he said, standing to greet her. His voice was calm but carried that authoritative tone that made it seem like he was always in control. "Let's get straight to it," he continued, gesturing for her to sit. "I have a contract. I want you to read it carefully. If you need to, take it with you and review it with someone you trust. There's no rush to sign. I want everything clear from the beginning." He handed her a folder thick with papers. Claire looked through it carefully, unsure what to look for. She'd never dealt with contracts. There were clauses about medical care, housing, food, and of course the amount she'd receive at the end. It was well planned, but cold, like a simple business deal. "It's a lot of money," she murmured without meaning to. "It's enough for you to start over," Marcus said, leaning forward slightly. "I want to make sure you have everything you need throughout the process. I'm not interested in creating problems for you, Claire. I want everything to be as smooth as possible." She met his eyes, searching for any sign of a lie, but saw only determination. Even so, a weight pressed on her chest. She was about to make a decision that would change her entire life. "Okay," she said at last. "I'll do it. But only if everything is exactly as you said. No surprises." "No surprises," he repeated, nodding. "We'll start with medical exams. I want to be sure you're healthy before the next step." In the weeks that followed, a new world opened to Claire. Doctor visits, tests, exams she'd never imagined doing. She moved into a small but comfortable apartment Marcus rented for her. It wasn't luxury, but it was far more than she was used to. Hot water, a real bed, even a fridge full of food. It felt strange at first, but she soon adapted. Marcus kept his distance. He accompanied her to important appointments and always asked if she needed anything, but otherwise didn't interact much. Claire felt he did it on purpose, to keep everything professional. Part of her was grateful. It was easier when there were no emotions involved. Still, as days passed, she couldn't shake the sense that her life was changing in ways she didn't yet understand. With that first yes, there was no going back. Claire and Marcus were officially in the same boat now, but from the start it was clear they'd be sailing rough waters. They were opposites in nearly everything, and it showed in the first days of closer contact. The agreement stood and the rules were clear. But no one had warned them how complicated it would be to deal with each other. Marcus had a direct, almost cold way of doing things. He liked control, schedules, order. Every part of his day was measured, and he expected everyone around him to follow the same rhythm. Claire, on the other hand, was a storm of improvisation. After years on the street, she'd learned to live without routine, deciding in the heat of the moment. Following a rigid plan felt like wearing clothes 2 sizes too small, suffocating. Their first collision happened on an ordinary morning. Marcus arrived at Claire's apartment to take her to another medical appointment. He had his watch on and impatience written on his face. "Your appointment is at 9, it's 8:30 and you're not even ready," he said, folding his arms. Claire appeared in the doorway, holding a mug of coffee, not the least bit worried. "Relax, there's time. The clinic's close, we'll make it." He sighed, frustrated. "It's not about making it. It's about being on time. I don't like being late, non-negotiable." She let out a light laugh with a hint of defiance. "And I don't like bossy people, also non-negotiable." In the car, the silence was heavy. Marcus drove with eyes fixed on the road, clearly trying not to explode. Claire fidgeted with the radio, changing stations every few seconds just to test his patience. "You don't like music?" she asked, feigning innocence. "I like silence," he replied dryly, tightening his grip on the wheel. "Well, silence isn't exactly my thing," she shot back, finally stopping on a very upbeat pop station that was far too lively for his taste. It was like that all the time. Marcus viewed the world as if it were a chess game, each piece in its place, every move calculated. Claire played something more like a messy board game, where the rules changed constantly, and most of the time she made up her own. At first, Marcus tried to ignore their differences, just a hiccup to him, but Claire knew exactly how to poke holes in his armor. She didn't do it on purpose, at least not always. But she had a way of dismantling his facade, and in a way she found that fun. He was so serious, so controlling, that she felt like testing how far he'd go before he lost control. The differences showed in small things too. Marcus spoke as if he were in a boardroom, every word chosen, every sentence with an objective. Claire was spontaneous, saying whatever came to mind, often making him pause and look at her like she was an unsolvable riddle. One night, while Marcus was explaining the next phase of the contract, with charts and everything, Claire interrupted with an unexpected question. "Why are you like this, so serious all the time? Doesn't it get tiring?" He stopped mid-explanation, clearly caught off guard. "Like what?" he asked, frowning. "I don't know. Robotic. Like you have an internal instruction manual you follow to the letter. Never do anything just because you feel like it." Marcus went quiet, as if searching for an answer. I do what needs to be done. That's how I've always lived. It works. Claire shook her head, laughing softly. Works for you, maybe. For me, it sounds suffocating. He didn't respond, but her words lingered longer than he wanted to admit. Deep down, something about her spontaneity intrigued him. He couldn't grasp how someone who'd been through so much could still smile, joke, even tease. She, on the other hand, couldn't grasp how someone who had everything lived as if he were always carrying the weight of the world. Despite the differences, or maybe because of them, something started to shift. It wasn't easy or quick. Each was used to a way of living that made no sense to the other. Slowly, Marcus began to realize not everything needed to be so controlled, and Claire, though she'd never admit it, started to value the stability he brought to her life. Their personalities were like opposite magnets, attracting and repelling at the same time. But underneath, both knew they'd need to find balance, because like it or not, they were stuck in this journey together. The days settled into a careful routine, and Claire began to adapt to her new chapter. Regular appointments, a balanced diet, even a personal trainer Marcus hired for light exercise. It felt strange to be somewhere everything seemed to revolve around her well-being. She still distrusted it all, but she couldn't deny it felt good to have some stability. At least for now, Marcus was the same as always, methodical and impassive. He accompanied Claire to nearly every appointment, but always in a practical way. No smiles or encouraging words. He was there to make sure everything was proceeding as planned, like a manager checking a project's progress. Claire tried not to think too much about it. It was still surreal to be in that situation, and she often wondered if it was real. Then came the day that changed everything. A sunny morning. Claire woke more tired than usual. She'd been feeling a different kind of fatigue for days, plus light dizziness now and then. When she mentioned it to the doctor, he suggested a more detailed test to confirm if the procedure had worked. Marcus sat beside her in the clinic waiting room, phone in hand reading emails, while Claire picked at the zipper of her jacket. The silence between them was almost tangible. As always, Claire couldn't resist breaking it. "Do you think it worked?" she asked, glancing at him. He lifted his eyes from the phone and shrugged. "The doctors said the chances are high. We just need to wait." "You talk like you're waiting on a financial report," Claire joked, trying to ease the tension. "It's a baby, not a spreadsheet." He didn't respond right away, a faint twitch at his lips, like he was holding back a comment. "I prefer not to set expectations until I'm sure. That's how I handle things." Claire rolled her eyes. Of course, control, control, control. Before he could answer, a nurse appeared at the door and called Claire's name. They stood and Marcus followed her to the exam room. The doctor, a middle-aged man with a gentle smile, was waiting with the results. "Good news," he began, looking at Claire and then Marcus. "Congratulations, the procedure worked. You're pregnant." For a moment, time stopped. Claire blinked, trying to process the words. Pregnant. Something that had seemed so distant was now real. She looked at the doctor, then at Marcus, who was also silent, absorbing it. "Pregnant," she repeated, as if needing to hear it again to believe it. "Yes," the doctor confirmed, still smiling. "It's early, but everything indicates the pregnancy is progressing well. We'll keep monitoring to make sure it all goes smoothly." Even though it had happened through artificial insemination, in that moment Claire felt closer to Marcus. Though she didn't want to admit it. She leaned back in the chair, a storm of emotions inside her. She didn't know if she was happy, scared, or just confused. She placed her hand over her abdomen, almost without thinking, trying to connect to what was happening inside her. Marcus kept his eyes on the doctor. "Next steps?" he asked, voice flat. "We'll schedule more appointments and regular exams to track development," the doctor replied, still smiling. "For now, everything looks as expected." On the drive back, the silence felt different. Claire stared out the window, lost in thought. Marcus drove with the same serious expression, but the air had changed. The news of the pregnancy had tightened something between them. Not bad, not exactly comfortable either. Just different. "You okay?" Marcus asked finally. Claire turned, surprised he'd be so direct. "I think so. It's a lot to process." He nodded. "I understand." "You don't seem excited," she blurted, then regretted it. I mean, I know you're not the jumping for joy type, but I thought you'd react differently. He exhaled, searching for the words. It's not that this is important to me, very important. I just want to make sure everything goes right. Ah, yes, she teased gently. Good old total control. He didn't answer, but there was something in his expression that made her realize that behind that facade, there might be more, feelings he didn't know how to express. Oddly, that made her less uncomfortable. From that moment on, everything would be different. It wasn't just about her or about Marcus anymore. There was another life involved, something bigger than either of them could predict. And though the journey was only beginning, she felt deep down that this was the part that would change everything. The days that followed the confirmation of the pregnancy brought a quiet, deeper shift in the way Claire and Marcus related. It wasn't something they planned or even recognized at first. It was as if the walls they kept between them began to crack, letting small sparks of humanity slip through. It started subtly. After the news, Marcus began visiting Claire more often. He claimed it was to ensure she was following every medical recommendation, but Claire sensed there was more to it. He wasn't as rigid as before, and at times he even tried to start conversations about things not in the contract. It was strange to watch him try to loosen up, but also a relief. As much as she wouldn't admit it, dealing with someone who seemed like a machine was exhausting. One rainy afternoon, Claire was in sweatpants, wrapped in a blanket on the apartment sofa, watching a cooking show, something that always distracted her, when the doorbell rang. "Who shows up unannounced in weather like this?" she muttered, opening the door to find Marcus holding a grocery bag. "You didn't answer your phone, I got worried," he said, stepping in without waiting to be invited. Claire laughed, closing the door. "I was napping. Relax. I'm not going to disappear." "Good to know," he replied, setting the bag on the kitchen counter. "I brought a few things. Figured you wouldn't want to go out in the rain." She peeked inside, fruit, juice, even a few treats she'd mentioned weeks earlier. She was surprised but didn't show it. "Trying to score brownie points," she teased. "That's not it," he said, serious but with a faint smile. "I thought it would be useful." For a moment, Claire didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to gestures like that. It wasn't the money or the comforts he could offer. It was the fact that he remembered what she liked and cared enough to bring it small, but heavy with meaning for her. Over time, these interactions repeated. Marcus would show up often, always with a practical excuse, to review medical reports, to check if the apartment was in order. Gradually, the visits turned into conversations. Real ones. One night, Claire sat on the sofa with a bucket of popcorn, watching a movie when Marcus appeared again, clearly exhausted. Suit rumpled, tie crooked. "Rough day?" she asked without taking her eyes off the screen. "As always," he said, dropping onto the opposite end of the sofa. "What are you watching?" "A classic," she said, gesturing toward the TV. "Back to the Future. Don't tell me you've never seen it." "I have, but it's been a while," he said, removing his tie and tossing it aside. "It was one of my favorites when I was younger." Claire smiled, surprised. "So you like something besides spreadsheets and charts? That's new." He rolled his eyes, but there was a glint of humor. "Very funny. My dad used to put it on for us to watch together." She noticed the shift in his tone when he mentioned his father. Marcus rarely spoke about his personal life, and Claire took the opening. "He sounds like a good guy." "He was," Marcus said with a small smile. "He believed deeply in legacy. Maybe that's why I take it so seriously." Claire stayed quiet, feeling him open up in a way he never had. She didn't want to spoil it. She nudged the popcorn tub toward him. "Want some?" He grabbed a handful, and for the first time since they'd met, they sat together watching a movie in a comfortable silence. No tension, no contracts, just two people sharing a simple moment. Weeks passed, and the relationship kept shifting. They didn't discuss it, not even acknowledge it. But gestures and moments spoke louder than words. Marcus started bringing books about pregnancy and newborn care, saying Claire might find them useful. She, in turn, began asking about his work, genuinely curious about a corporate world that felt galaxies away from her reality. During one appointment, the doctor suggested Claire get ready to hear the baby's heartbeat. When the sound filled the room, something strange happened. Claire looked at Marcus, his eyes fixed on the monitor, body motionless. For the first time, she saw something on his face that wasn't control or coldness, raw, undeniable emotion. "Pretty incredible, right?" she said, trying to hide her own feelings. Marcus only nodded, eyes still on the screen. "Very." Without realizing it, something larger was forming between them, not friendship exactly, and certainly not romance. A bond, a mutual understanding, built slowly from small moments and unexpected gestures, and though neither was ready to admit it, that bond was changing everything. It was supposed to be a routine appointment. Or so Claire thought. She'd grown used to the clinic's comfortable chairs, the soft background music, the polite patient doctors for Marcus. It was a planned routine. Arrive, wait quietly, accompany Claire, ask pointed questions. Same pattern, same controlled calm. That afternoon, Claire lay back in the ultrasound chair while the doctor prepped the equipment. Marcus stood beside her, arms crossed, posture perfect, watching like it was an important meeting. Trying to lighten the mood, Claire glanced at him. "You could relax a little, you know. It's not like I'm giving birth right now." "I am relaxed," he said flatly, eyes on the monitor. "Right, you look completely laid back," she joked, rolling her eyes. The doctor chuckled softly while he spread the gel. "You two make a good team," he said, and Claire burst out laughing. Marcus frowned, clearly missing the joke. "See, Doc, I'm the only one who gets his sense of humor," Claire teased as the exam began. It started like all the others. A brief silence while the doctor concentrated on the monitor. Claire was used to the technical explanations about the pregnancy's progress, but this time something in the doctor's expression put her on alert. He frowned, leaned closer to the screen, and moved the transducer more carefully. "What is it? Is something wrong?" Claire asked, heart racing. Marcus straightened, posture even more rigid. "Is everything okay?" he said, voice serious and concerned. The doctor looked at them with a smile that was half amused, half surprised. "Everything is more than fine. Give me just a minute." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Claire stared at the blurry grey shapes on the screen, unable to make sense of anything. Finally, the doctor turned. "I have news. It appears we don't have just one baby here. We have 3. Claire's eyes went wide. "3, as in triplets." Marcus blinked, like he needed time to absorb the word triplets, he repeated, the word sounding strange in his mouth. The doctor nodded. "Yes, it's rare, but it happens, especially with assisted reproduction. All 3 are healthy and developing well. You're having 3 babies." Claire let out a nervous laugh. "Triplets. 3. My God, doctor, are you sure that machine's working right?" He laughed. "I'm sure, Claire, I can point out each one on the screen, show you their heartbeats." He began to point, explaining where each baby was and showing how they each had their own rhythm. Claire barely heard him. Her mind spun in circles, trying to process that instead of 1 baby, there would be 3. "This wasn't in the contract," she muttered to herself. Marcus heard. He exhaled deeply and ran a hand over his face. "No, it wasn't." What surprised Claire was his tone, no irritation or frustration. Just a kind of resigned tiredness, as if he'd already accepted it before fully processing it. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know," he answered honestly, rare for Marcus. "This changes a lot." "You're not alone," Claire said. "I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to carry 3 at once. I might need a second stomach." Despite the nerves, the joke drew a weak smile from him. In that moment, Claire realized that as strange as it was, they were beginning to lean on each other. The idea of triplets was terrifying, but somehow it didn't feel impossible. The drive back to the apartment was calm but full of silent reflection. Claire stared out the window, trying to imagine life with 3 babies. She'd already been nervous about 1, and now 3 felt like a cosmic joke. At the same time, a small spark of excitement flickered. It was crazy, yes, but also incredible, 3 lives growing inside her. Marcus drove in silence, hands steady on the wheel. He was a man who liked to control everything, to predict every scenario. Triplets weren't part of the plan. Even so, he felt something he couldn't explain. Not fear or frustration, something deeper. Maybe the beginning of a sense of responsibility he'd never experienced. When they arrived, he turned to her before she got out. "If you need anything at all, tell me." Claire was surprised by the genuine concern in his tone. Okay, and you too. I know you're Mr. I handle everything myself, but we're in the same boat now. We are, he replied immediately, giving a small nod, the closest he'd come to admitting she was right. As Claire headed upstairs, one thing was certain. The news of triplets had turned everything upside down. But somehow she knew they would find a way. After all, there was no other choice. The discovery of the triplets changed everything for Claire. At first, she was terrified. It was hard to imagine handling 3 babies at once, especially when she hadn't planned on being a mother to begin with. For weeks, fear dominated her thoughts. How would her body cope? What would happen after they were born? Would she be able to do it? Questions came in a steady flood, and each answer seemed to spawn more. But as time passed and the pregnancy advanced, something began to shift. It was subtle at first, like a gentle warmth rising from deep in her chest. She noticed it in small moments, like when she felt the first movements inside her belly. At first they were strange, like fluttering wings. As the months progressed, the kicks grew stronger and Claire began to connect with the little beings she didn't yet know. One afternoon, lying on the sofa, she placed both hands over her now visibly larger belly. A sudden kick, stronger than usual, made her gasp. It was different, like one of the babies was trying to get her attention. Instinctively, she smiled. "Okay, little one. I get it," she murmured, not realizing she was speaking out loud. In that moment, she understood. Something was growing inside her that was far more than physical. It was an emotional bond she hadn't planned or asked for, but it was there, firm and strong. Claire had always been a survivor, someone who lived day by day, not daring to dream. Now, for the first time in years, she felt she was living for something bigger than herself. The day she heard all 3 heartbeats together was another turning point. She was on the exam table with Marcus seated beside her. The doctor adjusted the equipment, and suddenly the sound filled the room. Thump, 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 thump. 3 small hearts beating with slightly different rhythms, but equally alive. Claire stared at the monitor, her eyes brimming with tears. It wasn't sadness or fear, but a kind of emotion she'd never felt before, like she was witnessing the beginning of something magical that would change her life forever. Marcus, who rarely showed emotion, was visibly moved. He said nothing, but the way he stared at the screen, a mix of admiration and awe, said it all. In that moment, Claire realized that however differently they handled things, the 2 of them were bound together by these 3 small miracles. As the months passed, Claire prepared for the baby's arrival in ways she never imagined. The apartment Marcus had rented began to transform. Once functional but impersonal, it was soon filled with tiny clothes, blankets, even toys. She spent hours on her phone, learning everything she could about newborn care. Marcus noticed the change and, instead of stepping in as he had at first, started giving her space. He came by less often, but when he did, he brought things he knew she'd need. One day, he showed up with a set of nursery furniture and tried assembling the crib. Claire watched him struggle with the instructions and couldn't stop laughing. "I'm guessing you were great at this as a kid," she teased. "My childhood was a little different," he said without looking up from the manual, "but I think I'll survive." She moved closer to help. It wasn't a grand moment, but working side by side, laughing at mistakes, celebrating when a piece finally fit, stuck in her memory. Proof that things were changing, even if slowly. The biggest awakening, though, came when Claire realized how she saw herself was changing. Before, she thought of herself as someone on the margins, surviving as best she could, without big ambitions or expectations. Now she saw something else. A mother. It didn't matter that the original plan was to carry Marcus's children for a few months and move on. An instinct had awakened in her that she couldn't ignore. She started talking to the babies, even though they couldn't answer. "You comfy in there? Are you listening? I hope so." Sometimes she rambled about her day, what she'd eaten, how the pregnancy was tossing her around. Other times, she whispered deeper confessions, her fears, her hopes. One night, sitting alone in the half-finished nursery, she held a tiny outfit she'd bought and began to cry. Not from sadness, but relief. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was where she was meant to be for once. She wasn't running from something. She was moving towards something that truly mattered. The triplets hadn't arrived yet, but they were already changing who she was. Claire, the woman who'd endured so much and closed herself off, was opening up. And in doing so, she found something she never expected: strength. Marcus Stanton had always prided himself on clear, quick decisions. He did it daily in business. Measured risk, analyzed numbers, chose the most efficient path. Simple. For a long time, he believed he could apply that logic to every part of life, including the idea of having a child. But with Claire pregnant with triplets and their bond growing, Marcus was realizing not everything could be controlled. It was a dilemma he hadn't anticipated, because he never thought there would be a dilemma. In his mind, everything would be practical. Claire would have the babies, he'd handle their future, and she'd go on with her life, free. But over time, he saw nothing was as simple as it seemed. What complicated things wasn't the 3 babies on the way, but how Claire had changed the way he saw the world. That night, Marcus sat in his glass-walled living room with a whiskey in hand. The city glowed beyond the windows, but he barely noticed. All he could think about was how far things had drifted from his script: Claire, the triplets, the emotions he'd tried to ignore. He forced himself to focus on work, his usual escape. He opened his laptop, stared at financial reports, but the words scrambled. With an irritated sigh, he shut the computer and pressed his head into his hands. For the first time in a long while, he felt out of control, and it scared him. Claire was part of it. From the start, he knew she was different. She wasn't like the people he was used to, those who said what he wanted to hear or followed orders without question. Claire challenged him, provoked him, asked questions he never allowed himself to consider. She wasn't afraid to confront him or to show vulnerability, a quality he respected, though he rarely admitted it. And then there were the triplets. Before, the idea of a child was practical, almost symbolic, an heir to continue the family legacy. But now that there were 3 and he could hear their heartbeats, Marcus realized he was starting to care in ways he never imagined. It wasn't about a name or legacy anymore. It was about real lives that would depend on him, about being a father. A few days later, Marcus stopped by Claire's apartment with a bag of fresh fruit and a few books he thought might help during the pregnancy. He found her on the sofa, working at a blanket she was knitting. He stared. "You're knitting?" She looked up and smiled. "Trying. It's for them. I don't know if it'll be any good, but I'm trying." He set the bag on the counter and took the chair beside her. "You're taking this very seriously, aren't you?" she asked, raising her eyebrows. "This is huge, Marcus. 3 babies. You can't pretend this is just another task on your to-do list." He was quiet. "I know. That's why I'm here, I think. I think I need to understand what I'm feeling." "And what I'm feeling?" she asked, eyes on the yarn. "It's complicated," he said, elbows on his knees. "I always thought it would be practical. Have a child, raise him, prepare him for the future. But now, triplets, you're different." Claire paused and looked up. "Different how?" He sighed. "I care more than I expected. Not just about them, about all of this. About you. And that scares me." She was surprised by his honesty. It wasn't like Marcus to talk this way. She could see he was struggling to understand himself. "Being scared is normal, Marcus. This is big. But being scared doesn't mean you can't handle it." Marcus began to question what it meant to be a father. Could he love these babies the way they deserved? And what about Claire? Was she part of that future, or would he keep pretending this was only a deal? The questions haunted him, and for once he didn't have answers. One evening, he walked through a park to clear his head and saw a father playing with his kids. The children's laughter rang in the air. Marcus stopped and watched, trying to see himself in that scene, kicking a ball, telling stories, being someone his children could trust. It felt distant, far outside his comfort zone, but a strange warmth filled his chest. A new feeling, unnamed but important. For the first time, he faced something he couldn't control or plan, something demanding more than logic or strategy, and as frightening as it was, he knew he had to face it. Not for himself, but for the triplets. Maybe for Claire, too. Their routine was starting to find a rhythm despite everything. The appointments, the preparations, the conversations neither would admit were important. Then Raphael Brennan appeared, and it was like someone shook the board and scattered all the pieces. Raphael was an attorney and an old friend of Marcus's. From college, unlike Marcus, who carried a rigid professional posture most of the time, Raphael had an easy lightness. He was the kind of person who made any room feel more relaxed just by walking in tall, neatly cut brown hair, effortless smile. Raphael was a sharp contrast to Marcus's seriousness. Claire met Raphael on a morning like any other. She was adjusting the nursery furniture when the doorbell rang. Thinking it was Marcus, she opened without asking and found a man she'd never seen. "You must be the famous Claire," he said, offering a warm hand. "I'm Raphael, an old friend of Marcus's." Claire hesitated, then shook his hand. "Oh, come in. Marcus isn't here yet, but he should be soon." "Great," Raphael replied, stepping in like an old friend. He looked around, genuinely interested. "You've done a great job. It's getting cozy in here." Claire gave a half smile, still trying to place him. He wasn't at all what she expected from one of Marcus's friends. There was something disarming about him, a kind of energy that made her feel at ease. When Marcus arrived, he found Raphael and Claire laughing in the kitchen. She'd been telling a story from the streets about a stray dog that followed her for days, and Raphael was completely engaged. "I see you've met," Marcus said, voice neutral, the one he used when hiding discomfort. "We have," Raphael answered, still smiling. "You never told me Claire was this funny. You're terrible at introductions, you know that?" Claire laughed, but noticed the shift in Marcus's face. "He's not exactly the social type," she said. Raphael leaned on the counter, arms crossed. "Oh, I know. Marcus is a fortress. But I always find a way in." In the days that followed, Raphael started stopping by more often. He said he was helping Marcus review contract details and legal rights for the triplets, but it was clear there was more. He made a point of including Claire in the conversations, asking what she thought, how she felt about decisions. Unlike Marcus, who treated everything practically, Raphael seemed truly interested in her perspective. Claire began to enjoy having him around. He was kind, funny, and most importantly, made her feel seen. He didn't look at her like someone performing a role in Marcus's plan. He treated her like a person with stories, opinions, and feelings that mattered. It touched her more than she wanted to admit. But Raphael's presence also created a clear tension with Marcus. It wasn't explicit, but Claire saw it in their glances and the loaded silences. Something was there. History or conflict they didn't say aloud, but Claire could feel it lurking. One evening, Raphael arrived with a bottle of wine, for himself, and a wide smile. "I brought something to brighten the night," he said, setting the bottle down. "And before you say anything, Marcus, I know you hate surprises. Relax. This will be fun." Claire laughed. "Marcus, relax? Good luck." Marcus shot Raphael a look. "This isn't a party, Raphael." "Maybe it should be," Raphael replied, unfazed. "You two are having 3 babies. That's worth celebrating, don't you think?" The tension between them was obvious, but Claire stayed out of it, watching with curiosity as Raphael somehow coaxed Marcus into joining a more relaxed conversation. A rare thing, and she knew it. As weeks passed, it became obvious that Raphael was getting close to Claire in a way Marcus didn't expect, and maybe didn't approve. Raphael included her in everything, listened to her stories, made sure she felt important in the process. Without realizing it, Claire began to feel torn. On one side was Marcus, serious and controlling, but with a sense of responsibility she respected. On the other was Raphael, who made her feel special, like she was more than just the mother of the babies. What Claire didn't know was that while she tried to sort out her feelings, Marcus was confronting something he wasn't prepared for. Jealousy. He'd never planned on caring so much about Claire, much less on facing the idea of losing her to someone else, especially someone like Raphael. Things got complicated when Raphael stopped hiding his interest in Claire. At first, his compliments felt like simple kindness, comments any friend might make to lighten the mood. But over time, his intentions became clear enough that even Claire, who wasn't exactly experienced in love, noticed. Raphael had a way of making anyone feel special. He was attentive, funny, and the opposite of Marcus in nearly everything. Where Marcus was reserved, Raphael was warm, Where Marcus spoke cautiously, Raphael was spontaneous. For Claire, this was new. No one had ever looked at her with such interest, least of all someone like Raphael. Charming, confident, seemingly effortless. The growing tension made Marcus increasingly uncomfortable. He didn't say anything outright, but his expression hardened every time he saw Raphael and Claire laughing together. It made something move inside him, something he didn't want to name: jealousy. One afternoon, while Claire was finishing what she called the most crooked blanket in the world, Raphael arrived with a gift: 3 tiny baby outfits, each with a funny phrase: Boss number 1, Boss number 2, and Boss number 3. Claire burst out laughing. "This is hilarious," she said, holding the outfits to her chest. "I love it." Raphael sat beside her on the sofa, smiling. "Thought we could add some humor to balance the seriousness around here." Before Claire could answer, the apartment door opened and Marcus stepped in. He stopped mid-stride, Claire and Raphael laughing on the sofa, the outfits spread across the coffee table. His look turned from light to tense. "What's going on?" he asked, trying and failing to keep his voice neutral. "Relax, Marcus," Raphael said. "I brought Claire a present, that's all." "You seem to have a lot of free time for delivering presents," Marcus shot back, shutting the door harder than necessary. Feeling the tension, Claire tried to ease it. "They're just baby clothes, Marcus. Nothing that breaks the contract," she joked. The line didn't land. He shook his head and walked to the kitchen, ignoring Raphael's invite to join them. Later that night, after Raphael left, Claire confronted Marcus. "What's going on with you? You've been, I don't know, off whenever he's here." "I'm not off," Marcus said, looking away. He sat in the armchair, clearly bothered. "You are. Every time he shows up, you look like you just lost a big deal. What's going on?" He was silent for a few seconds before answering. "He doesn't need to be this involved. He's your friend, Marcus. He's trying to help. And honestly, he's been good support. I don't see the problem." "That's the problem," Marcus said, voice firmer. "I don't think he's here just to help. And you know it." She blinked at the bluntness. "So what if he isn't? He's been kind to me, something you rarely are. Does that bother you?" "Yes," he said, meeting her eyes. "It does. Because as much as I've tried to keep this professional, I can't ignore it anymore. I care about you, Claire, more than I should." The confession stunned her. Marcus had never spoken about his feelings. He was the man of control, contracts, logic. And now he was admitting something that didn't fit any of that. "Marcus, she began, but he lifted a hand. "You don't have to say anything right now. I just wanted you to know." Claire lay awake for hours, turning over Marcus's confession and Raphael's behavior. She didn't know what to do. Raphael made her feel special, maybe for the first time ever. But Marcus, flawed as he was, had been a constant in her life from the moment this began. She didn't know what she felt. She only knew the situation had spun out of control. What began as a simple contract was now something far more complicated. And as the triplets grew inside her, Claire knew she would, one way or another, have to choose. Marcus was at his limit. He'd always been good at keeping things under control, but Raphael was testing every boundary he had. It wasn't just Raphael's constant presence, it was the way he acted with Claire. Smiles, easy conversations, the natural way he made her laugh. It was starting to gnaw at Marcus, making him feel what he didn't want to admit. Jealousy. It all came to a head one afternoon when Claire mentioned that Raphael was taking her shopping for baby things. Marcus couldn't explain why it bothered him so much, only that it did. So when Raphael came to pick her up, Marcus was waiting. "We need to talk," he said before Claire could open the door to leave. He didn't wait for a reply, just gestured for Raphael to follow him onto the balcony. Raphael raised an eyebrow, intrigued, and went. "What's up?" As soon as they were alone, Marcus closed the glass door and turned. "What do you think you're doing?" Raphael crossed his arms, still smiling. "Not sure what you mean." "Be specific." "You know exactly what I mean," Marcus said, voice low but tense. "You're here too often. And the way you are with Claire, that's not just helping." Raphael's smile faded, though not entirely. He tilted his head, weighing the moment. "You're jealous." "That it?" Marcus paused but didn't look away. "This isn't about me. It's about you," Claire is going through a lot. The last thing she needs is someone taking advantage. Taking advantage? Raphael repeated, genuinely surprised. You serious? Because last I checked, the person who put Claire in this situation was you. The words hit Marcus like a punch, but he didn't show it. He took a breath, keeping his cool. That doesn't change the fact that you're crossing a line. She's part of something bigger, something that doesn't involve you. Doesn't involve me. Raphael uncrossed his arms, his tone firm now. Marcus, you don't see how you complicate everything. You treat people like pieces on a chessboard, like you can move them at will. Claire isn't a piece in your game. She's a person, and yes, I care about her, maybe more than you do. Marcus clenched his jaw, but didn't answer right away. He knew Raphael was right, at least in part. He had started this as a transaction, practical, emotion-free. But everything had changed. He cared about Claire more than he wanted to admit, even to himself. And seeing Raphael grow close to her made him realize how much he wanted to protect her. Not just for the baby's sake, but because she had become important to him. If you really care about her, respect the boundaries, Marcus said at last, voice steady. She has enough to worry about without you complicating things. Raphael gave a short laugh, with little humor. Maybe you're the one complicating things, Marcus. Claire deserves more than a contract and a stack of rules. She deserves someone who's by her side, not because he has to be, but because he wants to be. Marcus narrowed his eyes, but before he could reply, the door slid open. Claire stood there, eyebrows raised. Everything okay? You two look like you're about to fight. All good, Raphael said with his usual smile. Just a chat between friends. Marcus said nothing, just nodded. But his look at Raphael said the conversation was far from over. That night, alone in his penthouse, Marcus replayed Raphael's words. He hated to admit it, but parts of them echoed in his mind. Claire did deserve more than a contract. The question was, could he offer that? And if not, was he ready to lose her to Raphael? It was a humid pre-dawn in New York. The city breathed slowly under the streetlights and the few cars gliding past. In Claire's small apartment, the silence shattered with a muffled cry. She lay in bed, forehead slick with sweat, a look of pain that said something was wrong, or very right. The time had come. Claire tried to stand but recoiled as the pain surged. She breathed, trying to recall the doctor's instructions about labor. Stay calm, breathe. You've got this, she murmured, but the pain ignored her self-control. The phone sat on the nightstand. She reached with effort and dialed the first number, Marcus. He answered almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting. Claire, he said, voice tight with concern. You okay? No, I think they're coming, she said, breathing hard. Stay calm. I'm on my way. Don't do anything alone. I'm coming. 15 minutes later, Marcus arrived, disheveled for once, but Claire could see he was as nervous as she was. Raphael showed up shortly after. Of course, he was nearby. Between the two of them, Claire made it to Marcus's car. On the drive to the hospital, she squeezed Raphael's hand while Marcus drove with near-obsessive focus. You two are way too quiet, Claire complained, fighting another contraction. Somebody say something, please. It's going to be okay, Raphael said with a smile meant to calm her. You're stronger than you think, and the doctors are the best. We're almost there, Marcus added, eyes on the road. Hang on. The hospital was organized chaos when they arrived. Nurses and doctors met them at the entrance, and Claire was rushed to the delivery room. Marcus and Raphael waited outside. Restless, trying to look calm, avoiding each other's eyes. Inside, Claire felt like she'd crossed into another dimension. The pain was intense, but something bigger carried her through. Instinct, love, maybe pure adrenaline. She was about to bring 3 lives into the world. There was no going back. The medical team moved quickly, voices coordinated. First baby crowning, someone said, and Claire felt a thrill of relief and panic. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Moments later, the sweetest sound filled the room, the cry of a newborn. Tears streamed as the first baby was held near her for a few seconds, then taken for initial care. You're doing great, Claire, a nurse said, while the doctors prepared for the next. The second came soon after, then the third. Each cry felt like a miracle that made her forget the pain, if only for a moment. When the last baby was placed in her arms for a few seconds, time stopped. She looked at that tiny, perfect face and felt something she couldn't explain, as if everything she'd endured had been worth it to reach this moment. Outside, Marcus and Raphael jumped to their feet when the doctor appeared, smiling. "All three babies are healthy. Claire is doing well too," he said. Marcus exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Raphael clapped him on the back, but Marcus only nodded, still processing. He wasn't one for big displays, but inside he felt a relief and happiness he couldn't describe. When Marcus entered the room, Claire lay in bed with the three babies in her arms. Raphael stayed outside to give them a moment. "Look at them, Marcus," she said, exhausted but glowing. "They're perfect." He stepped closer, almost afraid to break something. When he saw their faces, something in him shifted. For the first time, he'd found something bigger than himself. Bigger than his plans, his business, his ambition. He was looking at the future, and it was incredible. Claire watched as he gently touched a tiny hand, hesitant. "You'll be a good father," she said, breaking the silence. He looked up, surprised. "You think so?" "I know so," she smiled. "You just have to stop trying to control everything." He didn't reply, but the look he gave her said enough. In that hospital room, with the triplets in Claire's arms, Marcus realized his life would never be the same. And for the first time, he was okay with that. The triplets had been home only a few weeks, and they had already transformed everyone's life. Claire's once quiet apartment was now a symphony of cries, giggles, and joyful chaos. Exhausted but deeply fulfilled, she spent most of her time caring for them. Marcus had hired a team of nurses, but Claire insisted on being present for every important moment. Feeding, changing, and sometimes holding all three at once, even if it meant sleepless nights. Marcus visited often. He was different, more present, less controlling. Still, despite this new version of him, Claire felt a tension she'd been avoiding. She'd bonded not only with the babies, but with the idea of being their mother. The plan that had seemed so simple now felt unbearable. How could she hand over the triplets and move on as if nothing had happened? She couldn't. Not anymore. One afternoon, while Marcus was visiting, holding one of the babies, a habit he was surprisingly developing, Claire decided it was time to speak. He looked down at the tiny face with a calm expression she had never seen on him before. "We need to talk," Claire said, taking the sofa. The seriousness in her tone caught his attention. "Okay," he replied, laying the baby carefully in the crib and taking the opposite chair, gaze intent. Claire drew a breath. "I know we had an agreement. I know this started as a transaction. But things changed, Marcus." "I changed." He leaned in slightly, elbows on his knees. "What are you saying, Claire?" She paused, choosing her words. "I can't just hand the babies over and walk away. They're mine too. I carried them for 9 months. I felt every kick. I heard every heartbeat. I love them. And I don't care what the contract said. I'm not giving them up." Silence. Marcus didn't move, his eyes locked on hers, analyzing every word and gesture. He didn't look surprised, but there was something in his expression she couldn't read. "You know what that means," he said at last, voice low. "I do," Claire replied without hesitation. "It means I want to be part of their lives. Not as a stranger, but as their mother. I'm not asking permission, Marcus. I'm telling you how it's going to be." He leaned back, hand over his face. He was quiet so long that Claire grew anxious, but she knew she couldn't back down. Finally he spoke. "I didn't expect to hear that from you, but if I'm honest, I understand." She blinked, surprised. "You do?" "I do," he said, meeting her eyes. "Since they were born, everything changed for me too. I thought this would be simple, but it isn't. They're more than a legacy. They're my family, and in a way, you're part of that too." His words stunned her. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. It was rare to see him so open, but she still had to stand her ground. "So you agree with me?" she asked carefully. Marcus gave a faint smile. "I'm saying we'll have to figure out how to make this work. Together." The conversation didn't end there. In the days that followed, they had several talks, some calm, some heated. Claire made it clear she wouldn't accept being a supporting player in the triplets' lives. She wanted to be present in all decisions, from schools to clothes. And though Marcus still resisted at times, he started to see she was right. She was a real mother, and no contract could change that. A decisive moment came weeks later. They were together in the apartment, the babies asleep, when Claire brought out the original contract. She placed the papers on the table between them and stared at him. "This means nothing to me anymore," she said. Marcus picked up the papers, looked at them for a few seconds, then did what Claire never expected. He tore the contract in half without a word. Claire watched, a mix of relief and emotion rising in her chest. There were no more barriers, no more deals, just the two of them trying to figure out how to be a family. Marcus looked at her with a sincerity that stunned her. "You're right. They're as much yours as they are mine. We'll do this together." In that moment, Claire felt she was finally where she belonged. After he tore the contract, Marcus knew something inside him had changed for good, like a weight he'd carried for years was dissolving. But he also knew the problem wasn't just the present, Claire, the triplets, or even Raphael. The problem was him, what he'd been avoiding all this time, buried under success, control, and relentless routine. Now it was surfacing, and he had nowhere left to run. Marcus wondered when he'd become the man he was, someone who treated feelings like obstacles, who preferred contracts to real connections. Maybe it started with his father's death. He'd always admired the man who raised him, a determined businessman, but a loving father who taught important lessons over chess at day's end. His father's sudden passing left a void Marcus never knew how to fill. After that, it was all about control, making sure nothing slipped from his hands. Like his father's life had he plunged into work, built an empire, and armored himself against anything that could shake that fortress. 2 failed marriages only reinforced the idea. People were unpredictable, fragile, and trusting was a risk he wasn't willing to take again. Weeks after tearing the contract, Marcus visited the house where he'd grown up. It had been empty for years, but he never had the nerve to sell it. A big place, simple, with walls that still held the marks of a happy childhood. A patch of paint where he and his father tried to paint together, a scratch on the living room floor from a fall while learning to ride a bike. The smell of old wood and nostalgia hit him like a punch. He walked the rooms in silence, a mix of comfort and pain. In the living room stood his father's old leather chair. Marcus sat, almost expecting to hear his father's voice, telling a story about business or the importance of keeping your word. Something broke inside him. A knot rose in his throat, and for the first time in years, he let the tears fall. He realized he'd spent his life trying to be like his father, while doing everything to avoid feeling as deeply as his father had. His father had been strong, but never afraid to show love and vulnerability. Marcus, on the other hand, had lived afraid of anything that made him look weak. He stayed for hours, remembering what he'd learned and where he'd failed. He understood that deep down he'd been afraid of being hurt again, of trusting and losing. So he built walls so high he isolated himself from what truly mattered. Leaving the house that night, he knew he had to change, not for Claire, not for the triplets, but for himself. He couldn't keep living as if feelings were enemies. He couldn't be the father his children needed, or the man Claire might want by her side if he didn't face what was inside him. The next day, Marcus made a decision he never imagined. He found a therapist. Sitting and talking about himself felt ridiculous, but he knew it was necessary. In sessions, he unearthed things he'd buried for years. The loss of his father, fear of failure, the sense that no matter how much he achieved, it would never be enough. Slowly, he began to see that control wasn't everything, that life was about the moments you allowed yourself to feel, even if it meant risking pain. Most importantly, he realized that loving, as a father, partner, or friend, was the greatest challenge and the greatest reward. One day after a session, Marcus stopped by Claire's. She was in the nursery with the triplets, humming softly as she rocked 2 of them. He stood in the doorway, quietly taking it in. Warmed by a surge of love and gratitude that both crushed and lifted him, Claire noticed and smiled. "You okay?" "I'm trying to be," he said, stepping in. He lifted one of the babies from the crib with care. "You know, Claire, I've spent my life avoiding this, But now, holding them, I realize it's the most important thing I've ever done. She looked at him for a long moment. It's never too late to start, Marcus. He knew she was right. Facing his past had been hard, but necessary. Only then could he be the father, and maybe the man he'd always wanted to be. Even after Marcus tore up the contract and made it clear he wanted a life with Claire and the triplets, something still lingered in her heart. She was relieved that he finally recognized her importance as a mother, but doubt hovered. There was also Raphael, warm, uncomplicated, who'd never hidden that he wanted more than friendship. Claire knew she had a hard choice, though deep down something in her was already taking shape. It was a quiet afternoon. Claire sat on the small sofa, rocking one baby, while Raphael sat nearby, chatting in his easy, light way. He joked that she already seemed like an experienced mother, despite being new to it all. "You have a gift," he said, watching the baby settle in her arms. "Not everyone can handle 3 at once and still smile." She laughed, shaking her head. "I don't know if it's a gift, Raphael. Sometimes I think it's sheer stubbornness." "Gift or stubbornness, either way, you're incredible," he said, sincerity in his eyes. "And I want you to know I'm here, no matter what." Claire felt the truth in his words. Raphael was everything she could want in a partner, kind, funny, and he clearly cared. But as much as she wanted that to be enough, something was missing. It wasn't his fault. It was simply that whenever she pictured the future, it was Marcus she saw beside her, for all his imperfections. Later that day, after Raphael left, Marcus arrived, looking tired, like someone who'd been thinking too much and sleeping too little. He sat beside her on the sofa and watched as she soothed the baby. "You look calm," he said, almost smiling. "It's an illusion," she replied, smiling back. "Inside my head is a mess." He nodded slowly, as if he understood exactly. "Claire, I know things haven't been easy. I know I haven't made them easier. But even so, you've been incredible. And I want you to know I'm trying to be better." She was surprised by the honesty. It wasn't like him to open up. "You've already changed a lot," she said softly. "I see it. I just don't know what to do yet." The next days were full of reflection for Claire. She thought about Marcus, about Raphael, about the babies, about who she wanted at her side, not just for her, but for them. Raphael was the easy path, the man who made her laugh and feel safe. But with Marcus, there was something deeper, beyond words. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying. And she knew that effort came from truly caring. Finally, one night, Claire asked Marcus to come by. He arrived quickly, as he always did when she needed him. When he stepped in, he saw her on the sofa with one baby in her arms. The other 2 slept in their cribs. "You needed to talk?" he asked, worry in his voice. Claire nodded and gestured for him to sit. She took a deep breath. "I've thought a lot. About us. The babies. The future." He stayed silent, but she saw the tension in his eyes, as if waiting for something that could change everything. "I know we started this in a strange way. I know not everything has been easy. But for all the complications, you've always been here. You've tried to do what you thought was right. And more than that, you've shown you truly care." Marcus swallowed, said nothing, waiting. "I had options," she continued. "Raphael, he's amazing. He's someone I know would stand by me without hesitation. But every time I think about the future, how I want to raise these babies, it's you I see there. No matter how much you annoy me sometimes or how much you try to control everything, you're their father. And somehow, you became part of me too." Marcus looked at her, and Claire saw something she'd never seen in his eyes. Relief, gratitude, love. He took her hand gently, as if afraid to break the moment. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. "But I promise, from now on, I'll do everything I can to be the man you deserve and the father they need." Tears slid down her cheeks, and she didn't care. "I believe you, Marcus. That's why I choose you." Life in their home was never the same after Claire chose him. The Upper East Side townhouse, once pristine and almost cold, was now bursting with life and chaos. Toys everywhere, the baby's sounds filling the halls, the smell of fresh coffee mixing with diapers and cleaning supplies. A wonderful mess, and to Marcus it finally felt like a home Claire was still adapting to the rhythm. Once she was just Claire, a woman who'd survived the streets, someone without many certainties. Now she was the mother of 3 babies and the partner of a man slowly learning to show emotion. Every day felt like a small victory, even with unexpected challenges. Marcus was learning to be less controlling. He still had moments, a sharp look when a shirt wasn't folded perfectly, or when the babies cried non-stop and he didn't know what to do. But Claire was always there, laughing, reminding him perfection wasn't the goal. One morning, as Marcus drank coffee in the kitchen, Claire walked in with a baby on her hip, the little one drooling on a towel she held expertly. Marcus looked up and grinned. "Look at you, multitasking." "Oh, it's easy," she joked, "if you ignore the fact I haven't slept in 2 days." He laughed, stood and came to take the baby. "Go rest." "I've got him." She raised a skeptical eyebrow. "You've got him? You sure?" "Claire, I know how to change a diaper now, and I didn't just learn it from the manual." He smiled at the baby. "Trust me." She laughed, handing him over. "Okay, Dad of the Year. If you need me, I'll be on the sofa pretending to sleep." Days passed in small moments that showed how they were all changing. Marcus got more involved. He was the dad who stood by the crib in the middle of the night, rocking a baby back to sleep. The one who played classical music, convinced it would boost development, while Claire rolled her eyes and said a little pop would do better. Claire transformed too. For the first time in her life, she felt purpose that went beyond survival. Being a mother was exhausting, chaotic, but the most beautiful thing she'd ever experienced beside Marcus, she discovered a strength she never imagined. One night after the triplets finally went down, they met in the living room. He brought her a rare glass of wine, she almost never had time to relax, and a whiskey for himself. They sat side by side on the sofa, quiet for a moment. "Do you think we're doing this right?" he asked, breaking the silence, voice soft, a hint of worry. Claire turned, surprised by the question. "Why wouldn't we be?" "Because I never imagined I'd be a father, never thought I'd have a family. Sometimes I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing." She set her glass down and took his hand. "No one knows what they're doing, Marcus. Not me either. But that doesn't mean we're not doing our best. And honestly, I think we're doing pretty well." He smiled, squeezing her hand. "Thanks for choosing me." "I didn't have another choice," she joked. "Who else could put up with you?" They laughed, and for a moment everything felt perfect, not because it was flawless, but because it was real. With time, things stabilized. Marcus balanced business with home, something he never thought he could do. Claire explored possibilities that once felt impossible. Like an online interior design course, she had a knack for transforming spaces, proven by the warm, personality-filled nursery she'd created. Above all, they found something they never expected. A real family. Not the picture-perfect kind from commercials, but one that worked their way, with laughter, arguments, challenges, and plenty of mess. The sun set, painting the sky in orange and pink as Claire and Marcus sat in the townhouse's small backyard. The place felt different now. More alive, warmer, as if the triplets' laughter and the love they'd built had transformed everything. The babies slept soundly after a day of cries, giggles, and play. Rarely Claire and Marcus had a moment just for themselves. They sat on a double lounge chair, a blanket over their legs, her with tea, him with a glass of wine. The silence was comfortable, filled only by the faint hum of the city. "They're so quiet it's scary," Claire joked, glancing toward the nursery window. Marcus laughed. "It's the calm before the next storm. In an hour, one will cry and wake the other two." She smiled and shook her head. "And you'll be the one to get up, because as a dedicated father, you're on night duty." "Dedicated father," he repeated, looking at the horizon. "Never thought I'd hear those words about me." Claire turned to him, her smile soft. "You're more dedicated than you admit." He didn't answer immediately. He set his glass down and faced her, eyes softer than she'd ever seen, like he'd been holding something back for a long time. Before she could ask, Marcus leaned in and kissed her. Not rushed, but slow and meaningful, as if he wanted her to feel everything he couldn't say. When he pulled back, Claire looked at him, surprised but silent. He cupped her face in his hands. "I've waited a long time to find someone like you," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I don't think I even knew I was waiting. But now I do. You're the woman of my life." Her heart pounded, eyes filling with happy tears. Words felt small, so she smiled, knowing they weren't enough. Finally, she set her hand over his and spoke, voice trembling with feeling. I took a long time to find my place, but now I know. It's here. With you, with them. This is my home, Marcus. He pulled her close, and as the sun slipped below the horizon, they kissed. In that moment, nothing else mattered. They weren't perfect, but they had everything they needed. Each other, the triplets, and the certainty that together they could face anything. Under a sky washed by evening, they began a new chapter. One that promised to be full of challenges and of love. Exactly the way a family should be.